Welcome back to the second part of this presentation. And in the second part, I want to specifically talk about the young people and their treatment conditions, and mostly in Azerbaijan, but I will provide also examples from Germany. First, I want to begin by telling how the data collection of this research process began. So I started in Hanover, which is a city in the northern part of Germany, and I spent about a year and a half in that city, and 8 months out of this entire time, I spent in an organization called STEP, that is located in the Lower Saxony, which is a state in Germany, and Hanover is a part or city in this state. And the STEP is the organization that provides various kinds of treatment, rehabilitation, and courses and therapeutic recovery high schools to young people who have been using drugs, and mostly illicit drugs, and sometimes also just prescription drugs for non-medical purposes. During those 8 months, I had a great opportunity to meet a lot of young people and hear their stories. And my role in some parts of this organization was as an adjacent social worker, which meant that I was not an officially registered social worker, but I was an adjacent social worker helping the main social workers in their tasks and their daily routines working with these young people. In some other departments of this organization, I worked as an English language teacher, mostly for just the freestyle conversation clubs. And this was a great opportunity to sort of gather with these young people who were attending this special recovery high schools. I will tell about this a little more, and talk with them about all kinds of different topics, and sort of establish some form of a record. Now, in typical research project, the data collection where the method is qualitative data. Qualitative data often means interviews, doing live interviews with people and listening to their stories and asking questions. You usually begin by establishing some form of trustworthiness and a relationship or a rapport with your potential study participants. And this is what I tried to do during those 8 months in Hanover that I spent with young people. And in those 8 months, I didn't stay in one place particularly, because the organization STEP has different branches, or so to say, different departments. There are clinics inside STEP. There are psychosocial rehabilitation centers. There are recovery high schools, and there are residential treatment facilities. Now, I will go through all of this step by step and tell you a little bit more what is this about. This particular case is, of course, about Germany, and Hanover is in Germany. Is sort of financed by the local drug commission in each state, and the drug commission allows various sort of treatment opportunities, which is funded by the state, and there are different sort of funding sources that come together. Now, interestingly, in Germany, most of the young people who apply for drug treatment have to go through all these procedures. So in this, for example, pie chart, you can see on the right-hand side the list of these different sort of therapeutic departments and services that a drug treatment institution provides. As I said, there is detoxification clinics. This is a sort of first step. The young person begins by attending detoxification clinic, and then they move into the transitional residential facilities. In these transitional facilities, there's usually a house where several young people, up to 10, 12 young people, live in the house. They share sort of rooms and on different floors, and there are social workers who live and with them and also govern or administer, take care of the administration of the householding. And there are psychotherapists that attend or come sort of to this house or treatment residential facility and provide daily or weekly therapeutic sessions. This is part of the treatment. So while the treatment, the recovery process goes on, young people are supposed and expected to live in these transitional facilities. Then there are, of course, while they live in these transitional facilities, they also attend specific schools. Now, these recovery high schools, or in Germany they are called Therapieschulen, which means therapeutic schools. It's the same understanding. In these recovery high schools, young people usually were not able to complete their studies in traditional state schools, or they were, they either dropped out or they were forced to sort of leave the school. In those cases, they attend, as part of their treatment, specific recovery high schools. And in these recovery high schools, they go over the state-approved regular sort of study curriculum, but at the same time, they attend different kind of sort of trainings, and they have psychosocial counseling and therapists and social workers and different forms of interacting with each other. They have a possibility to attend different courses and so on. So it is not just a school with a curricula, but it also carries a mission of providing support and counseling and, in a way, treatment specifically for young people who have suffered or have been negatively affected by illicit drug use. In some cases, of course, young people are not able to live in these transitional facilities or attend the schools, and sometimes quitting one of the sort of services provided by the institution can result in a complete determination of the entire drug treatment recovery program. In Azerbaijan, however, the situation is completely different. The only thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the available detoxification treatment. Now, in this study, I talked to a little bit more than 20 young people, but in the final sort of sample, I used the interviews of only 20 young people. And in this pie chart, I tried to divide sort of the numbers according to the different sort of recovery programs or formal treatment programs that they attended. The majority of the young people that I have interviewed, altogether, including Azerbaijan and Germany, have attended detoxification treatment. But only smaller proportions have attended, for example, transitional residential facilities or therapeutic schools. So you can see from this pie chart that most of the people, for example, the 10 young people who attended therapeutic schools are only in Germany and not in Azerbaijan. So in the final sample, I had the interviews with 20 young people, 10 participants from each country. Now, during the 8 months that I spent in Hanover, I was able to interview 6 young people, or I interviewed more with interviews and all, but I used 6 interviews at the end. After Hanover, I spent to Frankfurt, and I still live here. And I spent about 4 months in Frankfurt recovery high schools to talk to young people also here. And so I had 4 interviews in Frankfurt, and these young people were slightly older, but all the young people that I have worked with and spent time with were between the age of 16 and 21. The mean age of the beginning or the onset of drug use in both countries vary a little bit. So in Germany, it's close to 13, 13 and a half is the mean age of onset. And in Azerbaijan, it's closer to 16. It was 15.9, something around this number as a mean calculation. And this also played a role in terms of like how old young people were in, for example, I'm just checking the time, sorry. Specifically in this particular, for example, drug treatment centers in Baku. Now, in Germany, the recovery high schools in Frankfurt specifically were very similar to the recovery high schools in Hanover. And then after completing, or in between actually Frankfurt and Hanover, I spent about also around 4 months with 3 different trips to Baku, where I collected the 10 interviews in Baku. Now, important aspect in data collection to mention is how it requires time and establishing a relationship with young people before actually interviewing them. So in Azerbaijan, for example, if you remember about what I said about the national drug discourse, it was sort of a challenging experience to present yourself as a researcher. So when I had an opportunity to talk to young people in drug treatment centers, for example, the doctors often, the doctors, narcologists, and some other medical staff that worked in those drug treatment centers in Baku introduced me as a psychologist, as someone who is going to help the young person by talking to them. And this very much often conflicted with the idea of what actually psychological therapy and treatment means, but also conflicted with my role and image. And often when the interview began, I had to take some time and explain to the young person that I am not a psychologist, that I am a researcher, and I'm interested in their stories, but I am not here to cure them or to treat them as the doctors used to introduce me. And I think this is a very interesting, peculiar sort of incidents, because this means that the psychological and psychosocial counseling are still somewhat rare in the country, and people do not necessarily know what to expect when someone, is offered psychological counseling. In Azerbaijan, in Baku, there is one central drug treatment center, which is located a little bit outside of the city. This is often the case also in Germany. The residential treatment facilities or detox centers are located usually a little bit outside of the city. Sometimes it's located in another city, so young people have to move to another city to go to detox. In Baku, the treatment center where I collected data it is a big yard, and within a yard there are sort of several buildings, 2-story buildings, not bigger than that. And in these buildings there are wards, and in each ward unit there are up to 10, sometimes 12 or 15 patients. And there is only one kind of segregation between these wards. Is only based on sex. So men are separated from women, but young people are not separated from older people. So there is a mixed sort of community spirit or atmosphere in these wards, and very often young people who share these wards with other people told me that they had difficulties with staying with much more experienced drug users, and that they felt often unsafe, or that they often felt like they're interacting with people with much worse experiences. I have a quote to show this in the next part of my presentation. So usually in these wards, the only treatment, as I already said in the beginning, is the detoxification treatment. And young people are expected to stay in this center for about 3 weeks. And they receive special injections. Some of those injections are called cocktails. And those injections combine different kinds of fluids, vitamins. It's mostly for hydration, for relieving the pain. So there's some painkillers provided, and some medications to help sleep. So during the withdrawal process, of course, many people go through pain, through nausea, vomiting, headaches, or shiver, or sometimes a high fever. And to sort of help to reduce the negative effects of this kind of bodily experiences, withdrawal symptoms, they receive this sort of injections. Of course, about the effectiveness of these injections, we are not sure, and we don't know exactly how effective those injections are in terms of their consistency, and in terms of comparison between, for example, Germany or with other countries. But I personally do have experiences told by the young people themselves. And I will show the quotes to you later in the third part of the presentation, where they talk about what kind of treatment was actually helpful for them, what kind of injections were more effective than the others. So after spending some time in this drug treatment center, I was able then to ask some of these young people to introduce me to their friends or to their acquaintances, which is called snowball sampling in qualitative research. And through this sampling method, I was able to meet other people. Of course, I also had contacts to local psychotherapists, local doctor narcologists. Some of these people also were leading self-help fellowships, if you have heard about it, the 12 Steps Minnesota program. Which is usually not led by doctors, it's led by ex-drug users. And this is just sort of self-help, self-aid groups or fellowships. And through the connections, through meeting these people, and through my previous connections to this cohort of specialists and professionals, I was able to meet other young people. So through the drug treatment center, I was able to interview only 5. The other young people I interviewed outside of drug treatment, and mostly when they have already either completed their drug treatment process, or they were in a self-regulated or at-home recovery. So if we go back to the previous slide here, you can see, for example, right at the end, there is self-regulated at-home recovery. And self-regulated recovery in this case means that young people have, or their families have, decided not to apply for a drug treatment center, the formal institutional treatment, and stay at home. And this happens usually in Azerbaijan for 2 reasons. First of all, because, as I already told and explained, the drug treatment center does not provide very good conditions. Often cases there are no hot showers, there are no clean bed sheets. Sometimes there are no showers at all. You know, the young people are, you know, live with other older people in the same ward, and the sanitary conditions are very sort of low, of low quality. And so many families and young people who have already experienced or know about the drug treatment center prefer not to send their children to this treatment center. But what happens is they invite nurses from these centers or from other departments of state hospitals to do these kind of injections against withdrawal symptoms at home. And this is what I called this sort of at-home or self-regulated recovery. In some cases, young people have also tried to stop using any drugs by their own means. This means sort of experiencing the withdrawal themselves, trying to sort of ease the pain by the painkillers that they already know. And in that case, no doctors, for example, participate in the process at all. Now, another reason why young people or their families prefer not to go to the National Drug Treatment Center is because the anonymity is not provided 100%. Young people have to register when they are accepted or enrolled for the treatment. In often cases, this ends up in their archive of records of diseases. Now, being registered at a National Drug Center means that through their records, young people are not or will not be able to have any state-funded positions, jobs in their lives in the future, and that they will not be accepted for the military service. And these two aspects are very important. And for many young people, going to the military service also means securing state jobs in the future. So understanding this barrier and the sort of important stigmatization that is embedded in the national drug policy, young people and their families prefer not to enroll to the National Drug Center. Since about 5 years, in Baku, there are several also self-help fellowships, or these 12 Steps Minnesota programs. And these fellowships function in Russian language, in English, and also in Azerbaijani. And they are also mixed. This is a mixed group, but this is also very characteristic to 12 Steps programs, that young people and also adults and older adults attend these fellowships. And during my time that I spent in Baku interviewing and meeting these young people, I found out that their attendance of this self-help fellowships is actually very low in comparison to older adults. But the research from other countries, and mostly from the Euro-American landscape, show similar results, that participation of younger people or attendance of younger people to self-help fellowships are quite low in comparison to older adults. So this is so much about the situation and the data collection in these two countries. In the third part of my presentation, I will give you a lot more information and specific quotations from young people and their experiences with recovery.